Black Snake Moan is an American drama film released in the year 2006. The plot of the film follows the lives of two individuals, a religious farmer Lazarus whose wife betrays him, and a young addict, Ray, craving to satisfy her sexual desires after her lover leaves to serve in the military. Lazarus and Ray's paths meet when Lazarus finds her dumped on the road after being severely beaten. Lazarus must fulfill his spiritual duty to nurse Ray back to health and find a cure for her affliction. The film opens with two men talking about how love makes them do things they don't want to do and how it sometimes leaves them feeling sad and blue after one partner in a relationship deceives the other for love. The scene cuts to a young couple making out in their room. The boy is a soldier named Ronnie Morgan who is deeply in love with his girlfriend, Ray Duell. Before leaving for his deployment, he suffers from a panic attack and throws up. The scene cuts to a black middle-aged man, Lazarus Reed. He's a deeply religious farmer and a former blues guitarist who's heartbroken after his wife Rose cheated on him with his brother. He goes to a restaurant to meet Rose and sort out the matter, but Rose is bent on getting out of the marriage as she feels she's getting old with him. Despite Lazarus's efforts to keep the marriage intact, Rose makes it clear that she no longer loves him. When Lazarus threatens to curse her, she becomes furious and leaves the restaurant after creating a scene in front of everyone. On the other hand, Ronnie is all set to leave for his deployment in the military and ask Ray to see a doctor and get rid of her persistent cough. However, Ray is cranky that Ray is leaving and tells him that their relationship is not going to work. Ronnie calms her down by giving her a couples watch that's set to beep every night at the same time. This way they'll think about each other even when they are far away from each other. After bidding farewell to Ronnie, Ray starts lamenting and all of a sudden, she starts feeling strange sensations in her body, making her restless. The scene cuts to Ray having sex with a guy named Tyrone. Ray is a sex addict who has been using Tyrone to fulfill her sexual desires. In Ronnie's absence, Ray indulges herself in sessions of drug use, has random sexual activities, and wears revealing clothing to attract guys. The scene cuts to Lazarus destroying the rose field called Rose's Roses with the tractor that he cultivated for his wife. The betrayal of Rose has made Lazarus bitter and angry. At night, he goes to a bar where a woman named Mayella tries to hit on him. However, Lazarus refuses her sexual advances, making it clear that he will never hook up with her. Just then, Lazarus's brother Deke walks into the bar and tries to communicate with him to make peace. But Lazarus loses his cool and threatens to slit his neck with a broken glass bottle. Later at night, Ray goes to a party with her friends and gets drunk. Her friends make her believe that Ronnie does not care about her. Ray becomes frustrated and gets high after consuming some pills. Lazarus, on the other hand, gets drunk and dumps all of Rose's belongings out of his house. He takes out his guitar and starts singing his heart out. Meanwhile, back at the party, Ray is left all alone after everyone leaves. Seeing her in a vulnerable state, Ronnie's friend Gil Morgan offers to drop her at her house. In his truck, Gil tries to take advantage of her. When he begins to initiate sex, Ray starts laughing and compares him unfavorably with Tyrone, making Gil extremely furious. In his fury, he starts beating Ray to a pulp. Ray loses consciousness and Gil thinks that she's dead, so he pushes her body out of his truck, dumps her on the side of the road, and drives away. While Ray is lying at the side of the road, her watch starts beeping but remains unknown to her. On the other hand, Ronnie, who's serving in the military, misses Ray when his watch beeps. The next morning, Lazarus gets a call from his friend RL, who's a pastor. RL motivates him to stop curling up in the house and face the world, but Lazarus pays no heed to it. Later, while taking out the trash, he discovers Ray unconscious next to the road and brings her home to help her. However, Ray thinks of him as Tyrone and keeps calling his name, making Lazarus think that Tyrone is responsible for Ray's condition. Lazarus then heads to town to buy medicines for Ray's persistent cough. The local pharmacist named Angela helps him to pick up a medicine for coughs without a prescription. Meanwhile, Ray is in a miserable state as she can't stop hallucinating about Gil. On the other hand, Lazarus goes to see Tyrone and inquires him about the girl, learning about her sex addiction and promiscuity. Surprised, Lazarus returns home and finds Ray lying on the floor. He picks her up, introduces himself to her, and tells her that he's going to nurse her back to health. However, she flips out when Ray attempts to kiss him. Seeing Ray suffering in agony and burning with fever, Lazarus throws her in a cold water bathtub to break the fever. At night, she wakes up and tries to flee from Lazarus, but he catches her and stops her. Ray asks him to help her with her sexual desires, but Lazarus calms her down and puts her to sleep by singing a poem. The next morning, Ray wakes up to her senses and is surprised to know that she was out for 2 days. When she sees herself chained to the radiator, she gets the wrong impression and thinks that Lazarus has been doing something terrible with her. However, Lazarus clears the misunderstanding by elucidating that God has put her in his path with a purpose to cure her of her wickedness and that he is going to fulfill his spiritual duty. Ray wants to leave and disapproves of his claims. She runs away from the house and screams for help, but to no avail. Lazarus refuses to release her until she's cured and pulls her back into the house. After fighting Lazarus for quite some time, she gives up and eats like a wild animal. Lazarus starts taking her with him to the fields and applies ointments to her wounds. Ray can't control her sexual desires and wants Lazarus to sleep with her, but he feels embarrassed and refuses her advances. Having no other choice, Ray resists her inner temptations and goes to sleep. The next day, Lazarus goes to a woman's clothing store to buy some clothes for Ray to rid her of her crop top that she's been wearing for weeks. Meanwhile, Ray attempts to unchain herself while being alone at the house. On the other hand, Lazarus goes to Angela with a gift to thank her for curing Ray, whom he introduced to her as his niece. Just then, Lazarus' friend RL arrives and Lazarus asks him to leave as he does not want to be bothered by anyone. RL's worried for Lazarus as he's been avoiding his phone calls and hasn't been in contact with anyone ever since Rose left. Exasperated, Lazarus points his shotgun at RL and shouts at him to leave. Being a good friend, RL does not budge and suspects that Lazarus is in some kind of problem, so he assures him that together they can find a solution to it if he opens up about it. Lazarus takes him into the house. After witnessing that Lazarus has kept a half-naked young girl captive, he loses his mind and tries to reason with Lazarus. He thinks Lazarus is keeping her as his slave and informs him that the girl has suffered from many types of STDs. Lazarus assures him that he hasn't even touched the girl, but thinks that it's his duty to save her. He asks RL to have some conversation with the girl until he prepares the meal for the three of them. In the house, RL and Ray share a conversation about Jesus. Seeing Ray in a miserable state, RL advises her to talk to God and ask him for strength and forgiveness. When he asks Ray what is heaven to her, Ray answers, Ronnie. Meanwhile, Ronnie returns to town and goes straight to a bar where he meets Gil. Seeing Ronnie's gloomy face, a man sitting right next to him questions Ronnie if he's been charged with bad conduct discharge from the military. Ronnie loses his cool and tries to attack him, but is stopped by Gil. Later, he tells Gil that he's been discharged from the National Guard due to his severe anxiety disorder, and he isn't able to even shoot a gun. Gil encourages him by saying that returning home himself is better than coming back in a body bag. Ronnie then questions Gil about Ray as he hasn't been able to talk to her, and her friends are also unaware of her. However, Gil does not utter a single word about what he did to Ray. On the other hand, Lazarus gives Ray a modest dress to wear. Later, he prepares a home-cooked meal and shares it with RL and Lincoln as well. Meanwhile, Ronnie goes to Ray's house with Gil, searching for her, but is heartbroken as Ray is nowhere to be found. Seeing his friend suffering, Gil berates him for throwing his life away for a girl like Ray. When Ronnie tries to argue with him, Gil informs him that Ray cheats on him whenever he's out of town. Ronnie's unable to handle the truth and attacks Gil, steals his truck, and drives away. Meanwhile, back at the house, RL and Lincoln leave after dinner. Lazarus decides to free Ray as he understands that he has no right to keep her tied and change her. So he unchains her and offers to take her back to town if she wants. However, Ray chooses to stay and requests Lazarus to sing her a song. Lazarus agrees and sings for her Black Snake Moan during the stormy night. Ray's afraid of the thunder and lightning and seeks Lazarus for support. While Lazarus sings, Ray can't stop having flashbacks of her troubled childhood. The next morning, Lazarus drives Ray into town. While she goes into the grocery store, Lazarus meets Angela, and the two share a cute, romantic conversation. Meanwhile, in the grocery store, Ray bumps into her mother who works there and asks her to have coffee with her. Despite Ray's efforts to make peace between them, her mother suspects she needs money and tries to push her away. However, Ray does not hold back and confronts her about the abuse she suffered by her mother's partner. Instead of sympathizing with her daughter, Ray's mother shuts her off and regrets not aborting her when she got pregnant. Ray loses her mind and attacks her mother with a wiper stick, yelling at her for not protecting her despite knowing that her partner was abusing her. On the other hand, while Angela is singing Lazarus a song, he notices people gathering outside the store. Ignoring Angela, Lazarus walks inside the store and picks up Ray, leaving Angela flabbergasted. He takes her back home, gives her a relaxing bath, and lets her take some rest. At night, he decides to play a blues concert at a local bar and takes Ray along with him. Upon reaching the bar, Lazarus is surprised to see it unusually crowded. However, he starts the concert and attracts a lot of audience. Everyone enjoys the concert and grooves to the songs, including Ray. Just then, Ronnie spots Ray and is furious to see her enjoying herself in the bar. Ray and Lazarus return home, and the next morning, Lazarus wakes up and sees Ray trying to play his guitar. Seeing Lazarus, Ray hesitates, but he motivates her to sing. Ray closes her eyes and sings a song while Lazarus plays the guitar. Just then, Ronnie walks into the house and knocks on Lazarus's head with his pistol. He accuses Ray of hooking up with another man and tells her that he's aware of her promiscuity. When he points his gun at Ray, Lazarus diverts his attention to himself and instigates him to pull the trigger to talk him down. But since Ronnie suffers from anxiety, he's unable to shoot him and breaks down. While Ray confronts him, Lazarus calls RL to the house. RL talks to Ronnie and he starts opening up about how Ray fixed him when he suffered from anxiety and blames himself for not being able to help her. Ray confesses her love for Ronnie, admits her mistakes, and requests Ronnie not to give up on her. The two of them decide to get married as they are stronger together. Lazarus seeks help from Angela, asking her to glam up Ray as a bride. The film ends with Ray and Ronnie getting married and driving away. On their way, Ronnie starts having a panic attack after hearing a loud noise of trucks, and Ray begins to have one of her spells. However, the two of them resist their suffering by pulling themselves together. The movie has a rating of 6.9 on IMDb. The budget of this movie was around $15 million, and at the box office it earned $10.9 million. I hope you all like this video. If yes, then make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more movie recaps.